Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. It's the postgame pod from a crushing loss for the Wolves in a Game 4 thriller. We'll talk about why this game actually played out a lot like I kind of expected the series to, and exactly all the things we talked about on yesterday's show that should have been sustainable for Minnesota weren't. Talk about the biggest issues in this one for Minnesota. It's all coming next.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Happy Tuesday, everybody. The Timberwolves lose Game 4 on Monday night, a thriller, but a disappointing, really crushing loss nonetheless for the Wolves as they fall behind in the series 3-1. Game 5 coming Wednesday night in OKC. Obviously, win or go home for Minnesota as they'll try to force a Game 6 back at Target Center on Friday. A lot to dive into in this one. A lot that was somewhat expected, at least at the start of the series, and some stuff that I thought would happen in Game 4 based on what we saw in Game 3's win on Saturday that did not happen on Monday night. We'll talk about Ant's lackluster scoring performance, but I think not overall necessarily a bad game for Ant. It's just not what you really need in the most important game of the season to date. I thought overall the decision making was okay. We'll break that down. Talk about Julius Randle's no-show and massive role player games for the Wolves, but even bigger kind of second star games from J-Dub and Chet Holmgren on the OKC side, and that is not what Minnesota got from their kind of second and third options, or at least their second option, Julius Randle in this one. So a lot to break down today. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. And of course, you can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. All right. There's really a lot to get into in this one. Where I want to start is everything we talked about on Monday's show, all the stuff that Minnesota did right on Saturday in the Game 3 win, the convincing Game 3 win that I thought would be sustainable in Game 4 and beyond in this series. Most of it didn't happen the way it unfolded on Saturday, which sounds obvious. They won in a blowout on Saturday and lost a close game on Monday. But a lot of these things are things that coming into the series, I thought would be strengths for Minnesota against OKC, and we saw it happen on Saturday. So therefore, there was some hope that, like, hey, they figured this out. This is going to be better on Monday. That wasn't exactly the case. Obviously, high level, I don't want to go blow for blow in this one, but Minnesota was down 7 at the end of the first quarter. They gave up 37 in the first frame, but I actually thought the defense was at least very active. They forced a couple of OKC turnovers. The Thunder hit some tough shots. And really, that, to me, is one of the big takeaways. Like, just surface level, I know the Thunder shot over 50% from the floor, 43% from three. They scored 128 points. I actually don't think Minnesota's defense was that bad. There were some bad moments, to be sure. And it was obviously nowhere near what it was on Saturday in their winning game 3. But there were some positives, and especially early in this game. I thought the physicality was pretty good. And then at halftime, Minnesota was down 8. The third quarter, Minnesota had their big runs. They had big runs in the third quarter. Early in the fourth quarter, they tied the game. I think it was at 79 midway through the third quarter. OKC answered with a run. And that was like one of the stories of the second half of this game was every time the Wolves made a push, Mark Daigneault called a timeout. OKC would go on a 7-0, 8-0 run. Happened several times in the second half. Every time the Wolves would hit, a tough 2 in the paint from Dante or Jaden McDaniels, J-Dub or Alex Caruso hitting a 3 on the other end. Like that's how this game unfolded. And it's a massive credit to the Thunder. And it just underscores just how good OKC is. And I don't want to it's not soapbox time because we have a lot to break down in this game, but let's be careful to not discredit the Timberwolves for losing to an extremely good OKC Thunder team. I picked the Wolves to win the series in 7, which obviously is what's going to have to happen if they're going to win the series now. But the Thunder, as we established, and I talked about this last week, are a historically good team. A 68-win regular season team, the best point differential of any team in history, one of the best defenses, actually, I think the best defense in the past 20-plus years. Just a phenomenal team. And the Wolves have blown them out and gone toe-to-toe with them over the last 2 games. And yeah, the 2 games in OKC, games 1 and 2 were extremely disappointing. But if one of those turns out in a different way or they pull this game out, we're talking about a 2-2 series. And the Thunder are phenomenal. Minnesota played really well overall in this game. And the things that I ticked off on Monday's show that the Wolves got on Saturday that I was expecting them to get moving forward, that just didn't happen. One of the things was rebounding, was the offensive glass. Minnesota finally showed up on Saturday on the offensive glass, and yeah, they had 19 offensive rebounds in their in Tuesday night, Monday night's loss. Excuse me, the game 4 loss. They had 19 offensive rebounds. Great. So did OKC. The Wolves won the rebounding battle. They were +5, but OKC had 19 offensive rebounds. They had more offensive rebounds than they did defensive rebounds. Now, I thought this was a little fluky against the Wolves in OKC's favor. There were a couple of possessions where Minnesota just didn't put a body on a body. They didn't play a ton of zone in this game, so that wasn't as big of an issue as it had been in I think it was game 2. Games 1 and 2, but one of those games is worse than the other, where they played more zone. They couldn't rebound out of the zone, which is always a bit dicey for a team that doesn't play much zone. Like, it's a little bit, it's not a myth, but it's a bit of an exaggeration that it's rebounding out of a zone is like impossible. It shouldn't be, but for a team that doesn't do a lot of it, it can be challenging. And a team that has defensive rebounding lapses like Minnesota, it can be a challenge. That wasn't the sole, because again, they didn't play that much zone in this game, but overall, the defensive rebounding, there was some flukiness there. There were a couple of possessions where, like, Rudy's out guarding on a switch and Ant and Nas are down near the paint and are not rebounding. Or there were a couple of times or several minutes in this game where TJ Shannon was playing the 4. And I guess he only ended up playing 8 minutes total anyway, but they played really small with Shannon at the 4. And the rebounding just wasn't as good then. And that's not a knock on TJ Shannon. That's just a lack of size on the floor. And OKC, like, Isaiah Hartenstein started the game at the 5 and or next to Chet in the front court and did not start after half. Alex Caruso was on the floor to start the second half. Like, OKC pushed towards small ball. And at times, Rudy Gobert was able to take advantage. At times, the Wolves were able to take advantage. But Gobert only had 2 defensive rebounds in this game. Part of that was because he was out defending on switches and actually was fantastic. We'll talk more about that. I thought overall Rudy played really well. That's going to get lost here. And of course, people will probably rip on him for the lack of defensive rebounding. But it's because he wasn't in the paint. OKC was drawing him out of the paint. And he was the one contesting on the tough shots in the paint that the Thunder were missing and then getting offensive rebounds off of some of these, for them, advantageous bounces. I thought Minnesota had some bad luck on the defensive glass, but that was something I was expecting to be better overall in the series. And then when we saw it in game 3, I said, all right, maybe this will be what we expected moving forward. It was not. Limiting turnovers. That didn't happen. Minnesota had 21 turnovers in this game. But I'm going to make sure I got the right number here. 23 turnovers in this game for the Wolves. Too many turnovers. OKC had 22 points off of those 23 turnovers, which isn't like a crazy number. In fact, Minnesota was more efficient scoring off of Thunder live ball turnovers. The Wolves had a couple shot clock violations. Nikhil had a bad travel. There were a couple of offensive fouls and screens. Randle had one. I think McDaniels had one. So there were some dead ball turnovers, which helps limit that quite a bit. And like, if you're going to turn the ball over against the Thunder, it's got to be it can't be a live ball turnover. So Minnesota did an okay job at limiting those, but still 23 turnovers is far too much. We knew that was going to be a problem coming in. That was a problem. And so that, again, wasn't a surprise. And then making threes. This is something we expected coming into the series. We expected the Wolves to shoot better from 3. They were sub 30% in each of the first 2 games, and then they were 50% in the game 3 win. In this game, the Wolves were 44%, which is great. But OKC was 43%. I mean, like, it basically canceled that out, and OKC's role players shot the ball extremely well in this game. So that was not necessarily something I expected. I thought Minnesota's role players would shoot better than the Thunder's. And over the last couple of games overall, that's been the case. But in this one, it was basically even. And again, something that we expected to happen, but enough other stuff went OKC's way that it kind of negated that impact. I want to talk about kind of the big picture things. I want to finish off the stuff we talked about on Monday's show that I thought would be bigger impacts in game 4 for Minnesota. And then I want to talk about some of the more macro themes of this series that showed up in this game for the Wolves. We'll talk about some individual performances as well. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at WayFair. The days are getting longer, the weather's warming up, and people are spending more time outside, and that means it's the perfect time to refresh your outdoor space. Whether you're working with a big backyard or a small balcony, WayFair is everything you need to make it feel more like you. WayFair's massive selection of outdoor essentials makes it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversation sets to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that fit your budget. I have a great patio dining set, patio lounge set. I actually was I watched the Game 4 Timberwolves loss from that set. And there's a number of things. We actually got a couple of tables outside, kind of like end table type deals for our patio that we got from WayFair. And fantastic selection over at WayFair. The delivery there is free and hassle-free, even for the big stuff. If you're entertaining guests or maybe you're just relaxing solo, shop WayFair to help you unwind. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online. This summer, get outside with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair, WayFair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. All right. Themes from Monday's show that I expected the Wolves to happen and did not happen. The glass we talked about, the defensive rebounding was not great. Yes, there was some flukiness, some bad luck there, but overall disappointing. Limiting turnovers, that did not happen. Making threes, that did happen. The other thing was Anthony Edwards being Anthony Edwards. And I want to talk a bit about Ant's performance. I don't think it was a bad performance. You're going to see the typical kind of hot take artists give you that, on a national media level. And of course, that's the headline is Ant scores only 16 points in the most important, pivotal Game 4. Now you've got to pull off a historic 3 straight wins against one of the best teams in history, regular season teams in history. And I get it. Like, I understand why that's the headline. I would have loved for Ant to shoot better than 1 of 7 from 3. I would have loved for him to shoot more than 13 field goal attempts. However, I actually think his decision-making was overall okay. There were a couple of possessions where I felt like he could have put the pedal to the metal a little bit more, and he didn't until later in the game. But the Thunder were also loading up on him. Like Lou Dort, Alex Caruso, like having these dudes guard you is no picnic. Plus gap help. I mean, it's a lot like what the Wolves have tried to do to SGA. It's just the Thunder gap help has been better. They have more, believe it or not, they're like one of maybe the only team in the league that's got more long athletes that can do all of the above. Case in Wallace on top of Lou Dort, on top of, Alex Caruso. Like Lou Dort, Alex Caruso as primary defenders is tough. And then you add in Case in Wallace and or SGA, Jalen Williams, J-Dub, like any of these guys, J-Dub, J-Dub, Kenrich Williams to a lesser extent. But again, big athletic bodies that know what they're doing defensively. Minnesota has a little bit of that, but the gap help integrity isn't as good for Minnesota. They're just not as disciplined in the gaps. And OKC's phenomenal in that regard. And Ant still, got around some doubles. He split some doubles. He got into the paint, drew a crowd, and made the right pass. Like there was that left-handed pass he bounced to Conley, who knocked down a 3, I think, right after halftime that pushed it from a 7-point game, or I think it was 9. It was 8 at halftime. I think they got it down to 3 after a quick bucket. I think it was a tough Ant bucket, and then he drove the paint in the third quarter, kicked it left-handed pass to the right corner to Conley, who knocked down a 3 to pull the Minnesota to within 3 at the time and force an OKC turnover. Like that was an outstanding possession from Anthony Edwards. We saw a few of those in this game. He did have 6 assists. He had 5 turnovers, but the decision-making I thought overall was okay. And there's only so much you can do when they're loading up in the way that they are. Like the defenses he's seen are not exactly the same defenses that, pick your superstar is always going to see. And certainly Minnesota personnel wise, like it's hard for me to rip on the role players too much when like Dante scores 21 on 11 shots and Nikhil scores 23 on 15 shots and Jaden McDaniel scores 22 on 15 shots. Like these guys were all efficient and did a good job. The Mike Conley role, which he only played 19 minutes, like that became DiVincenzo and Alexander Walker kind of sharing the floor there. Like you'd love to have one more guy that could handle the ball that's more of a threat off the dribble. And the goal, of course, is Rob Dillingham takes the Mike Conley role, right? Like Rob Dillingham's supposed to be that point guard of the future. That didn't happen over the course of this season, and I understand why it didn't. Very curious to see where that goes moving forward, and we're going to talk that. We'll talk draft here soon too. Like there's a lot of time to talk about that. But I think the lack of another ball handler that could truly scare you off the dribble which again is something Dillingham was supposed to alleviate this year. This is kind of finally where that's showing up. They've had enough all season with Julius Randle as a second side attacker. They've had enough with, Jaden's been great. Dante, when he's good, like he hasn't done as much off the dribble. He hasn't attacked the paint as much in a Wolves uniform as he did with the Knicks. Just the role's a little bit different. But like in theory, he can do a little bit of that. So I actually don't think Ant had a terrible game. It's just you want him to be a little more aggressive. And he had a couple of, like, when they were down 3 with like 4 or 5 minutes left and Ant shot a tough 3 over a double team on the left wing that rimmed in and out. Like if he makes that and it's a tie game, perhaps this turns out differently. I didn't hate the shot. Like that was a moment for him to be appropriately aggressive. He did get to the line 7 times. And, got 7 free throw attempts, which, dragged down the overall field goal attempts just a little. He was still third on the team in field goal attempts. Like, I thought the level of aggression for Ant was okay. I didn't really have a major problem with that, but he wasn't what he was on Saturday. And what I said on Monday's show was, look, Ant was Ant on Saturday. You get that on Monday night, you're in good shape. They didn't get that. They didn't get the defensive rebounding, excuse me. They didn't get the limiting of turnovers. They made their threes, not quite to the level of Saturday, but they made, right in line with what we'd expected before the series, which brings me to my next point. The macro themes of this series that I talked about coming in showed up in this game. Minnesota making threes, and OKC allowed a ton of open corner threes for Minnesota. I think we'll talk more about that on Wednesday's show as we get ready for Game 5 back in OKC. The Thunder gave up a ton of open corner threes, and Minnesota made them in this game. By and large, they made them. That was expected. OKC forcing turnovers. That was expected. Minnesota's role players playing a big role in this game because of how aggressive the Thunder are in guarding Anthony Edwards. It was not Julius Randle. He did not play well. But everybody else, like we came into the series, I was talking about Jaden McDaniels being kind of an X factor of sorts, basically a non-star scorer for Minnesota. He had 22 points on 15 shots. He had 4 steals in this game and a block. He had 5 stocks overall, 4 rebounds, couple of assists, was very good. That was expected in this series. And I expected either Dante or Nikhil to have big series. They've both kind of been up and down over the first, well, really mostly down over the first 3 games. They both were great in this game. That was somewhat expected coming into the series. The rebounding. Minnesota did get 19 offensive rebounds. They just gave up 19 offensive rebounds. But again, kind of a macro theme that I expected coming into this series. None of that was really a surprise. What surprised me, I shouldn't say surprised me, what showed up in this game in a big way, maybe more than I was anticipating, was how good the non-SGA Thunder players played. And I go back again to that February game when Minnesota was down 24 in the fourth quarter, and they said, we're just going to straight blitz SGA every time he touches the ball 30-plus feet from the basket and make somebody else make a three. OKC missed something like 14 straight three-point attempts, most of them wide open. That didn't happen in this game. And by the way, in that game, Chet Holmgren did not play. He was great in this game. He barely scored in the fourth and had a couple of kind of so-so moments, but he had 21 on 14 shots, knocked out a couple of big threes, played really confident, had 7 boards, 3 blocks for Chet Holmgren. He was great. J-Dub, Jalen Williams, I thought had the most impressive game. He was great early, got quieted down. Mike Conley shut him down once in the paint, which was great. But he hit a couple of huge threes late. I think he hit the one after SGA almost traveled, didn't quite slide the pivot, and threw a pass through McDaniel's legs out to J-Dub on the left wing for a 3 that pushed, I think, the lead from 4-7 with just a few minutes left in the fourth quarter. He was 6 of 9 on threes, scored 34 points on 24 shots, had 5 assists, J-Dub did, and 3 steals. So the Wolves, like, their kind of ancillary next-level role players were all very good. Dante, Nikhil, Jaden McDaniels at this point is basically the third option offensively for the Wolves. Those guys were good. Naz Reid was okay. But their second star, Julius Randle, did not show up to the party. 5 points on 7 shots and 5 turnovers. As many turnovers as points for Julius Randle. The Thunder's second star and third star all did show up. J-Dub, 34 points, 5 assists. Chet Holmgren, 21 and 7. 9 of 14 shooting. They combined, Chet Holmgren and J-Dub combined to shoot 8 of 13 on 3-point shots. Those guys showed up. The one pass away guys for the Thunder showed up. Julius Randle did not show up for Minnesota. Rudy Gobert was quiet until a big third quarter for Minnesota. And I mean, those would be the guys you'd look to do something. Not that you're relying on Rudy's offense, but you'd expect collectively more out of those two guys. And instead, it was the backcourt. It was the guys that needed to take pressure off Ant in the on the perimeter, and they did, but they didn't get anything from Julius Randle, whereas the Thunder got a lot from J-Dub and Chet Holmgren. A couple more things I want to hit. We'll do studs and duds, and then we'll close out the show here today. All right. Let's talk about Terrence Shannon Jr. real quick. We talked about him pretty extensively on Monday's show. He was as advertised once again. He scored, I think, 7 quick points when he came into the game at the beginning of the second quarter, basically an Ant spot with Ant resting. Knocked down a 3, had a hustle play defensively, scored in transition, which is what he does. I don't know how you play him more, simply because, especially in this game, like I bet Chris Finch was prepared to play TJ Shannon more than 8 minutes if Dante stunk it up again, shooting the ball, or also defensively. By the way, side note, I don't understand why they put DiVincenzo on SGA as much as they do. I talked about this last week. Like, DiVincenzo on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not a winning matchup. That is not a good thing for the Wolves to do, and they did too much of it, especially early. I think they did a little bit less of it in the second half, if I remember correctly, but too much Dante and SGA. He's not big enough to affect what SGA is trying to do. And he's a solid defender. He's not an all, you could maybe guard SGA with the smaller guy if he's like an all-world defender. Dante's fine. He's not an all-world defender. He's not an all-world athlete. He's not big. That matchup to me makes no sense. Nikhil did a better job. But if those guys are playing well, which they did to the tune of, they were each 5 of 8 from 3. They combined for 11 assists and only 3 turnovers. Like, they were really good. Where's the TJ Shannon minutes coming from? Finch left him on the floor longer and played small, so he could leave him on the floor longer in part. And he still only ended up playing 8 minutes. I mean, Conley only played 19 minutes. So, like, more TJ Shannon, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And ultimately, is he going to give you more defensively than DiVincenzo? At this stage, I think probably. Honestly, especially in this matchup. So I'm not advocating necessarily less Dante, but like at this point, why not? Why not just play more TJ Shannon and kind of see what happens? Like, curious to see if Chris Finch, remember his first ever playoff series coaching the Wolves were the 6 playing Memphis, and he just benched D'Lo in favor of Jordan McLaughlin toward the end of one of those games. And I think they ended up winning, and it might have even been the elimination game when they lost. I think that happened as well. And it was kind of like, screw it. We'll see what happens here. I don't know that Chris Finch is going to do that here. And D'Angelo Russell was not playing well at the time, and DiVincenzo did play really well in this game. So I'm not saying he will do that, but more TJ Shannon would be a good thing. I want to talk about Rudy Gobert too. Gobert was great in this game, and it was a little surprising to see him on the floor. Well, at first glance, it would be a surprise to see the Wolves in a game they're trailing having Gobert on the floor in the fourth quarter, because we've seen, especially throughout the playoffs, the Wolves be willing to play smaller with Naz at the 5, with Randle and Naz on the floor, whatever, and play Rudy Gobert less down the stretch if they're trailing. But we saw when Gobert was off the floor, first half, second, anytime Gobert was off the floor, the interior defense was awful. Naz Reid did not have a good defensive game on the perimeter or in the paint. Without Gobert in the game, OKC was getting whatever they wanted in and around the paint. With Gobert in the game, things were a lot more difficult. And this is actually a good, individual player, single game plus minus is a fickle thing. It's not always accurate in terms of, it doesn't always really truly tell a story. Rudy was one of 3 Minnesota players with a positive plus minus in this game. Nikhil was a +6, which makes a lot of sense. Rudy was a +4. Mike Conley was a +2 in just 19 minutes. He was on the floor for that big third quarter push. Gobert at a +4 makes a ton of sense. The Thunder offensively were not nearly as good with Gobert on the floor. He held up in switches. I thought he did a good job contesting J-Dub, SGA, anybody who was switched onto. And in the paint was shutting stuff down left and right. This is one of those, he only got credited with 1 block, but he was really effective in the paint. This was a good Gobert game. I thought he played really well. You'd love for him to have more than 2 defensive boards, but as I identified in the first segment, he was drawn away from the hoop a bunch. He was the one contesting a lot of these shots on switches as a help defender as well. And I thought the Thunder kind of get away with whatever they want against Gobert in the paint. And people aren't necessarily watching that. People are watching the ball, right? But if he's getting held and whatever else, Folks at home are not watching that. It's happening. Like, they were real physical with Rudy Gobert, and you got to fight through it. And would have loved if Rudy had more than 2 defensive rebounds. Overall, all things considered, this was a good Rudy Gobert game. Thought he played really well. All right, let's talk studs and duds. Jaden McDaniels, 22 points. I don't know why I'm starting with Jaden. I guess no particular order. Jaden is a stud in this game. He was really good. 22 points on 9 of 15, 3 of 6 outside the arc, 4 steals, 4 rebounds, 2 assists and a block, only 3 fouls in 31 minutes. He was really good in this game. Interestingly, because of DiVincenzo and Alexander Walker playing so well and kind of the in and out toward the end of the game, offense, defense, Minnesota, like, Ant played 41 minutes. No one else played more than 32 minutes for the Wolves. They had 6 guys that played between 23 and 32 minutes. Really interesting. Mike Conley played 19. TJ Shannon played 8. Were the only 2 guys that played less than 23 minutes in this game for Minnesota. Anyway, Jaden was really good. Early, he was good late. He knocked on a couple of clutch threes in the corners late in this game. Like, this was another really, really, really good Jaden McDaniels game. He has become a bona fide offensive, I don't want to say he's a weapon, but certainly a threat. Like, teams, the Thunder tried to guard him with Chet Holmgren early in the game and allow Holmgren to wander off of him and shot block, kind of like what the Wolves had done with Rudy. Like, they used to do it against the Thunder and Josh Giddey last year a bunch, and allow him to roam and be kind of the free safety. They tried to do that with Chet, and the Wolves just spread the floor and said, all right, Jaden can attack these closeouts, and he can be aggressive, and he'll do that and be fine. And that's what happened. McDaniels was awesome in this game. Obviously, Nickeil Alexander-Walker was great. The best defender the Wolves had against SGA. He was better than McDaniels. McDaniels did get beat off the dribble some in this game, and I know I just gave him a stud, but defensively, I thought Alexander-Walker was actually better than Jaden. Alexander-Walker had 23 points on 9 of 15, 5 of 8 on threes, 6 assists, only 1 turnover for Nickeil, which is huge. He's the de facto backup point guard, has had his moments of serious issues with the ball in his hands in terms of turning it over and actually playing like a point guard, which he isn't, but he's been cast as a point guard by the Wolves coaching staff at times. Not at times. He's basically the backup point guard. 6 assists, 1 turnover in this one, 2 steals, 4 boards. A good game overall for Alexander Walker. And then the third stud, it's either Dante or Rudy. I'm actually going to go Gobert because I think his interior defense, I know they gave up 128 points. I know the Thunder had, a good scoring night, but the Wolves are actually a +4 points to the paint. They limited OKC to just 42 points to the paint. And I thought the interior defense was really good. And Rudy Gobert was, of course, a big part of that. Dante was good, obviously, 21 and 7 of 11 shooting, 5 of 8 outside the arc, 5 assists, and a steal for Dante. But I'm going to give Rudy that third stud in this game. No duds really at all. I thought Mike Conley was good despite the limited touches and limited minutes, just played 19 minutes in this game. Naz, you would love him to have more of an impact. I think a lot of people were expecting more of an impact from him in this series. The playoffs overall have been a decidedly mixed bag, leaning, in the wrong direction for Naz. I thought he was fine. I don't think he's dud worthy. I don't think any individual. Oh, I said none. Sorry. Julius Randle gets a dud in this game. I thought Ant was fine, as we talked about. You'd love him to be better. He's not. Like, let me just real quick before I get to Julius. And there's time for this, as a postmortem if this series ends, this week sometime, certainly. Anthony Edwards is not as good as Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's not. Is he more fun to watch? Unequivocally, yes. SGA is miserable to watch. He's really, really good at hitting tough shots, which is, by the way, if he didn't flop, he'd be a lot more fun to watch because he is really good at hitting those tough shots. He's more fun to watch, I think, than prime James Harden because he does hit those tough mid-range shots that even if they are not, like for most guys, that's not a great basketball shot. It's more aesthetically pleasing than the James Harden step back in my estimation. But the foul baiting is what makes it so tough. I mean, like we saw another 3-4 in this game where like the dude barely gets brushed and he just throws himself to the floor. He's an incredible player. He makes really tough shots even without the foul baiting. SGA is better than Ant. There's a lot of things about Ant's game that are similar, minus the foul baiting, to where SGA was a couple of years ago. Ant is still just 23. Like, should we have expected him to go toe-to-toe with the MVP of the league and beat him in this series? It would have been awesome. It would have vaulted Ant to top 3 player status. He's not there yet. He's got to find ways to attack some of these defensive coverages in the same way that SGA does, or similar ways, hopefully not exactly the same, hopefully still more aesthetically pleasing ways than SGA. But Ant is not SGA. SGA is phenomenal. Like, just is what it is, right? This was the sort of game I expected all series long. But the Thunder's second/third best player in Chet and J-Dub outplayed the Wolves' second/third best players. And despite the Wolves' ancillary players, there are other role players, the Dantes, the Nikhils, the Jadens being really great and better than the Thunder's, at least offensively. SGA was better than Ant, and those secondary guys were far better than Julius Randle. The Wolves turned it over too much, and that negated, any advantage they would have had on the offensive glass, which, by the way, was a wash also. So there's a lot of things about this game that played out exactly how we expected the series to play out, and they did not need a 5-point on 7-shot, 5-turnover Julius Randle performance. The decision-making was bad. He found himself playing in a crowd in a bad way several times early. Just overall, he had one good offensive rebound and drive, and then he had one same deal that was then a foul on Chet that then was overturned on a review. Just not a good Julius Randle game, and disappointing that both he and Ant, they combined to score 21 points in the most important game of the year. They fought hard. They played hard. There were a lot of things that were good. Minnesota won rebounds. They won assists. They won, a ton of these categories. They made more threes. They got to the free throw line more. They made more free throws. Like, all those things went in the Wolves' favor. But at the end of the day, the best two players in either team, OKC's best two players outperformed the Wolves' best two players. And with all those offensive rebounds and all those turnovers, it was just too much to overcome if you're the Wolves. All right, we'll break down keys to Game 5 on Wednesday, Game 5 in OKC at 7:30 Wednesday night. And we'll have that for you here. Hopefully you listened, or hopefully you watched the Locked On Sports Minnesota postcast, or the Locked On Wolves postcast, I should say, over at Locked On Sports Minnesota on YouTube with Jack Borman and Luke Inman. That was last night. It's actually the audio episode right before this in the feed. But again, they go live on YouTube following every game on Locked On Sports Minnesota's channel on YouTube. You can watch it Wednesday night as well. And then again, that audio will get posted to this feed. Again, I'll be back Wednesday with the regular Locked On Wolves show leading into Wednesday night's game. And then I'll be back again Thursday with the post-game pod. A big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. And you can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast, we thank you for making this show your first listen. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NBA Big Board show. NBA draft expert Rafael Barlow reacts to every workout, interview, and rumor leading up to the NBA draft. Somehow, just like 3 weeks away. Find Locked On NBA Big Board on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. And I'll be making my selection in our mock draft here soon. Believe it or not, the Wolves have a first-round pick this year. Remember, they have the Pistons pick, I think it is. So we'll dig into that a bit here soon on the show once the Wolves are officially eliminated. But in the meantime, listen to the Locked On NBA Big Board show. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.